Episode 23, duration 30 minutes.
1,000
Recorded
mile
6th of the
nautical
12th,
race. Never been
81.
in before and they won.
Replay date to be
Go on,
advised.
Yankee Birds. Hello and welcome to the Valley's people. Today, two very interesting people and different types of people at that. We're going to meet Australia's leading trick horse stunt rider, and that's Ian Gollen, the Flying Gollens, famous through royal shows and country shows Australia-wide. And also the Hunter Valley boxing trainer who currently has 2 Australian champions at his gym. I hope you can join us today. I'll be back in just a moment. Thanks for joining us today. It really doesn't matter where you go in the area of agricultural shows, whether it be Newcastle or Sydney or Adelaide, Brisbane, Hobart. Wherever you may go, you'll see the name of the Flying Gollens. And the Flying Gollens are from the Hunter Valley, and the principal Flying Gollen is our first guest on today's Valley People, Ian Gollen.
Hello, Ron.
Well, there's horsemanship and entertainment and showmanship which has been going on now for a few years with the Flying Gollens, and in fact it's one of the top star acts in the Australian circuit at the moment, isn't it?
Well, yes, we seem to get plenty of bookings anyway.
Yes, yeah, that must be the understatement of the year, because it, how did this really come into being, an act such as the Flying Gollens?
Well, I've always been associated with horses, or the whole family has, and my brothers, they join me sometimes in the act, and we used to ride as children, I suppose, and we got a little bit bored with the normal pony club type things, and suddenly we found that there were more exciting things to do, and we learned how to fall off horses, basically, to start with, and once we became really confident about not being hurt with falling, we then found we could do a few tricks, and we gradually honed them up and found eventually that we had an act on our hands, and there was a demand for it, and we just went from there.
Well, sliding under the belly of 3 horses is some act, Ian.
Well, yeah, that's a bit of a refinement of it. We didn't start doing that.
No, but you said you started falling off horses. What's the art of that?
Well, the art involved is in falling and rolling, landing either on your shoulder or your hip, and we found that there was an area, or a technique, if you like, of falling on your shoulder or your hip and then rolling off any galloping horse, and you'll very, very seldom get hurt. You won't break any bones. You might get bruised, but you don't tend to break bones. And once we became confident and competent, I suppose, at falling off like that, we could try anything without much danger.
Yes, you may not break bones, of course, is the term.
Yes, well, I think that you lower your chances anyway.
Yes, the country shows that you really started at before you're now seen by millions of people. You know, it's one of the most amazing things about a program such as this with champions in the Hunter Valley. No one seems to realise just what sort of world and international status they have, because people would tend to get excited, I guess, on the concert stage if they could perform to the number of people that you perform to each year in Australia, which has to run into millions.
Yes, it is. It's probably last year about 4 million people passed through the gates of the shows that we went to. Admittedly, we weren't seen by all of them, but at least we were there. It probably lacks the intimacy of, you mentioned, a concert stage, that concentrated excitement. But still, in some of the bigger showgrounds, when the stands are full, there's some tremendous atmosphere there.
Now, the tricks that you do, I guess, like any other sort of stunt, it's a highly calculated business. But I wonder if you could take us through some of those, Ian. You know, what stages do you progress to?
Well, as far as individual stunts are concerned, we do a certain number of traditional ones that the American trick riders have done, the Cossacks, things like stands and drags. The drags are basically hanging by your legs over various parts of the horse and so forth. There are others that we've developed ourselves, just using our imagination. And what we try to do is do a certain number of posed acts where you assume a sort of an acrobatic or a balance position on the horse, and we do a certain number of action type of acts as well, the vaulting and things like this. We find these very exciting ourselves. They're exhilarating things to do, and I think that's the crowd also gets that feeling. And then we do a certain number of specialised acts as well, and going under the belly is one of these, where you climb down one side of the horse, underneath his belly as he gallops along, and back up the other side.
But that wasn't good enough for you. You wanted to put two horses in.
No, well, we do want to try to, I suppose it's like any other form of entertainment. You'd like to try and keep ahead of your opposition, and we then found that, or we figured that we could probably do it under more than one horse, and we're up to 3 now, and that is a world record. That's been recognised as a world record, going down under the belly of one, under the bellies of the other 2, and up the far side. But that's about enough, I reckon. Yes,
I remember one of the Royal Easters. Of course, you've really got 2 types of spectators, haven't you? One is the horseman himself in the country who understands the sort of significance of some of the things that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got the city spectator who just sees it as entertainment.
Sure.
But I noticed that the commentator on a couple of the city shows that you've been at really gets the crowd excited when you do the, what did you call it, the drag, but over the tail of the
Yes.
horse, where in fact you're only inches away from the galloping hoofs of the rear.
Yes, that's right. That's the
It's a bit traumatic,
calculation.
isn't it?
No, not when you've got the horse going well enough. That's the calculation, though. I think it's dangerous for other people, far more dangerous than it is for us, because we practice it and we try to work out just how close you can go without any disaster occurring. And I think that's what the art of it is working out how far you can go without overstepping the limit and then having a tremendous prang.
I guess we should spare a word for the horses too. I imagine that there's got to be some relationship between the horsemanship and the horse and the rider.
Yes, there is. They're crucial to the whole thing. If you haven't got the right horses, you just can't do the acts. And we've looked at over 300 horses to get the team that we have now.
Really?
Yes, and you know, once you've got the right horse, it then takes about 3 years to get him going properly, till he gets the experience and the balance and everything else that goes into making him work them every day. But once they are going, they're tremendous. They really are good friends. You know, we develop, I suppose, a bond. That may sound a little bit corny, but that's what we do with those horses, and we have a lot of fun
I think
with them.
you could imagine that being very real, very important to your life, actually.
And I think they enjoy it too. That's the other thing. The horses, they don't do this sort of thing half-heartedly or under duress. You can see there's obvious enjoyment in the way they approach their task. That makes us feel good, and if they do that, I think that gives a sort of an enthusiasm to the whole act then.
I guess there'd be some unglamorous moments too, wouldn't there?
There's
I mean, you had a fall in Adelaide, for instance.
Yes. You know, there are always going to be injuries in it, and but you know, you get over those, or generally you can anyway. And the training is certainly unglamorous. You know, hour after hour, cold winter's mornings, cantering around a track, jumping on and off a horse, having him tread on your toe, and this sort of thing. But you know, there are compensations. So I enjoy the whole thing, though. I like training them, and I certainly like performing. But that's, you know, that's only a small part of the whole build-up.
There'd be 2 things, I'd imagine, wouldn't there? That one is that you've got to maintain your own physical fitness and refine the tricks that you are doing, which you just can't pull out every show. You've got to keep working on them, I guess. And I would imagine also that you're also planning ahead, sort of under the shower and other places, new tricks. So your work schedule is really part of each. Would that be right?
That is true. And as a matter of fact, I think the only limitation that we have in the development of new tricks is our own lack of imagination. There are just things that you can try. We use fireworks on these horses.
It's got to be something you think you can do and can't do, though, isn't it?
Sure, there are. You try them, you know, and to your cost you find that you can't do them. But the point I was going to make is that people have never really, I don't think, extended horses to the to the full extent of their capabilities. Most people regard fireworks as anathema for horses. You know, they just won't take them. But we can strap these giant titanium flares on the backs of the saddles, and they gallop around the track and take no notice at all.
Well, I think we saw that with the Queen, didn't we? Where in fact someone shot a revolver and the horse remained calm. So it's all training.
Yes, it is. It is an experience, letting them see that they're not going to get hurt, and once they've been through it a few times, depending on the personality of the horse, they'll accept it.
Yes. I wonder how you have this time for veterinary work in the Hunter Valley.
With great difficulty. I have a couple of very understanding partners, as a matter of fact.
Very, I would think.
Yeah. I train early in the morning. We sort of kick off before daylight most mornings, so that I'm finished by the time it's ready. I'm ready to go and start practice. And then when I go away, I put a locum in, or take holidays, or get round it somehow or other.
I wonder if the veterinary work in the Hunter Valley is changing, Ian. I mean, I should imagine it all started with horses and cattle, but now it seems to be moving backwards a little bit, or north or northwest.
Yeah, well, the valley itself's changing, of course. When I started in practice up here, that was 12 years ago, Our practice was basically large animal, probably almost 90%. Well, now the large animal component is contracting as well as the holdings become smaller, and there's much more urbanisation around Maitland in particular. So we find now that the large animal component of the practice is contracting, the small animal component is increasing. We're probably about 50-50 small animal and large animal now, but it's still an enjoyable area to be.
I'm fascinated, Ian, by the thing you said there before about the limitations of what you can work on. It's really, there aren't any, it's just all in the mind, but then that's got to be put into practice. How far, as far as danger and the relationship between danger and entertainment, you know, how far have you pushed so far? What are the two most torrid things that you're doing? Because I'd imagine you get scared some days, do you?
Yeah, probably. You're occasionally frightened, but generally when you don't know what's going to happen, the acts that we put on, we've practiced enough to be pretty confident about what's going to happen. And I think provided you get yourself fit enough and the horses are fit enough that you certainly get a little bit nervous before you go out, but I don't think scared's the right word. We get ideas from all sorts of people. People write to us or ring us up and say, why don't you try this? And some of them are obviously crazy, you know. There's no way in the world that you'd do them. But others have got some merit and you think, gee, there's something there, I'll try that. And you just work around it. And sometimes it takes months. Sometimes it takes years to develop one good trick, and other times you might get in a couple of months.
Well, what's your greatest push in imagination at the moment? What have you achieved that's the most self-satisfying of your tricks, do you think?
Probably getting under the belly of three horses. I don't think that I can. I don't think I can do any better than that at full gallop, because.
Now, can you describe that for those people who may not understand horsemanship?
What it involves is three horses galloping along side by side. My two brothers stand with a foot on either one. Well, they have a foot on either of the outside horses, and both their feet are on the middle one. And this is done to keep them about that far apart. They need to be probably about 15 inches apart. Then I start off sitting on the back of the inside horse. I climb down underneath his belly. I pass myself over to the belly of the middle horse, and then to the horse on the outside, and climb back up into the saddle. And I find that that's certainly physically the most difficult trick that I do, because you're suspended by your arms. You have to suspend yourself horizontally just by your arms. And I found that after I'd worked out the technique, that I just used to run out of gas before I could get to the other side. So it took me a fair while.
It's all shoulder and arm muscle.
Yes, it is, yeah. And, but once I've got it, and I've worked out a few little areas that are more comfortable getting through there, in fact avoiding their feet, they do hit you quite a bit with their front feet. So it's some incentive to get out quickly.
I'd reckon.
but now I'm pretty confident with it.
Yeah, well, how do you develop that sort of arm muscular control and pull you through? You've got to do exercises.
Yes, yeah, we do. We exercise all the time. I was up to about 600 push-ups a day just to get right for that particular act.
You did say 600, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
600 push-ups?
Yeah, my wife gets sick of seeing me in the bathroom going up and down and up and down. But still, it keeps me a bit fit.
Well, it keeps you fit and also keeps you as the top trick rider in Australia. Ian Gollen, thank you very much.
Thanks,
and congratulations to the Flying Gollens, real ambassadors for the Hunter Valley. And I'll be back in just a moment with our second guest. Welcome back to the Valley's people. The Hunter Valley has a boxing enthusiast, historian, and now the proud trainer of two Australian champions, Peter Berrigan and Phil Davis. And that person is Wal Bentley. Welcome to the Valley's people, Wal.
Pleased to be here. Right.
And what's it feel like to have two champions?
Feels very good indeed.
Well, I bet it does. Yes, yes. Because boxing in the Hunter Valley has been really something that's tied up with our history, hasn't it? You can go back to names like Darcy and Sands.
I think we'd even go back further to Slavin and the gold rush days, you know.
Yeah.
Boxing sort of evolved in the valley during the gold rush era. The mining camps all over the valley, and of course one of the major pastimes was bare knuckle fighting. And Paddy Slavin emerged from that, and he actually is our first valley champion, as you might say, in the art of fisticuffs.
Bare knuckles. So you go back to those old photographs or drawings of people standing there, and that most undignified pose that they had, wasn't it?
Well, that's right. I think the thing in those days, I think, was that a man was there to more or less prove his mettle, and the way of proving his mettle was to stand up to the other fella and never give an inch or that sort of thing, and just keep the thing going and try to batter him down if he could.
In the days before the Marquess of Queensberry, was it?
Yes.
You just actually knock somebody down. And
well, in those days, of course, a knockdown ended around. You would find that you probably read of fights that went for 72 or 73 rounds. Well, in actual fact, a round was when one guy got knocked down. Yes. He could go down and up, or in another instance, he could probably stay on his feet for 5 minutes, and that would still be one round.
Right.
And they went on as much as an hour and a half, or I think somewhere in the region of 2 hours for one of the longest ever.
Yes, it's like a John Wayne movie now when you start to talk about it, isn't it? Sort of just bash each other about there. But how important really now, looking at it historically, while you've had the chance to do this over some time now, just how important Les Darcy and Dave Sands, names like that, to the Hunter Valley in the world context, do you think?
Well, I think they're very important to the Valley because, for one thing, they're known all over the world. No matter where you go in the world, people have heard about Darcy. Of course, he died in the United States, and of course, Dave Sands fought in Europe, and of course, he was at that particular time the Empire champion, which is now a Commonwealth champion, and so he was very well known throughout the world. And both the people, both Darcy and Sands, were on the verge of becoming world champions until they tragically lost their lives.
It was a tragic death in both circumstances, wasn't it? Firstly, Darcy. There's a lot of romanticism about Darcy's death. I guess the true story, Walt Bentley would know.
Well, I suppose you've got to have folk heroes, and the story goes that Les Darcy, to further his boxing career, got aboard a packet steamer and sailed for America. And of course, at that particular time, it was the time of the First World War, when everyone was rushing to the armed forces to fight for the cause and everything else.
And some of the wives were pushing them.
Well, that's true.
Yes,
that's
I mean,
true.
it was a time when the white feathers and things were around, weren't they?
Well, that's right. That's a man was a man because he went to fight, sort of thing. And unfortunately, there are certain people, the knockers, which are always around, branded Les a coward because he'd gone to America, and they said that he was ducking his commitments to the country and by not going in the army. He had the thing actually followed him to America, where he was branded there also as a coward by certain elements of the media, and he did have, I think, probably one or two small fights, but he never realised the real reason that he went, and that was to fight for a world title. He contracted a bad tooth, and it turned into blood poisoning and resulted in his death, and he was only at the age of around about 20. But of course, the romanticists say that he died of a broken heart. Well, maybe there's a little bit of truth in that too.
Yes, indeed. And of course, Dave Sands, the tragedy of just happened to be driving a truck on that day and that time.
Well, that's a tragedy, as you say, because Dave, in everybody's mind, and I believe also in people's minds throughout the world, was definitely a world title prospect. He had, in fact, beaten Carl Bobo Olsen, who went on later to win the world's middleweight title. But once again, the romanticists come in and they say that the great Sugar Ray Robinson refused to fight him, was scared of him. This I would never ever believe.
No, it's hard to believe, isn't it? Well, when you've got the boys at the moment, you like Peter and Phil, there's a reputation to live up to, isn't it, with the great men of the past like that?
Well, I think so, and I think that the people that are always, and you know this is true as I do, there are always people that are prepared to sort of knock the people that are sort of coming along and never be as good as you know, the guys in the past, yes, and that sort of thing.
They don't write songs like they used to. How many times have you heard that?
Yeah, that's true. But I think Peter and Phil are doing a marvellous job for the boxing in this area, where they box all over the country. Of course, we go overseas too. And we always have Newcastle on the back of our outfits to let people, wherever we are, know where we come from. Newcastle, the Hunter Valley, of course.
Yes. And deep inside the Walt Bentley mind, I guess, is the hope one day there'll be a world champion through your gym.
Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing? The first world boxing champion from the Hunter Valley.
Yes. Well, let's hope that either of those boys can give you that title. Well, in 1,000 ways, I guess somebody has said to you in the past, you know, how do you react to training in this sport, which is probably the only sport around where you're training someone to knock someone else unconscious?
Well, I get very annoyed about it, because boxing has progressed from those days. If people had said that in the late 1800s or the turn of the century, I would have said, yeah, you're probably pretty well right. But boxing, like every other sport, has advanced, and it's become more scientific. There's more better training methods. And the whole idea of boxing, and this is my answer always, is that the art of boxing is to hit and not be hit. Now, if you get two skillful boxers putting that thing into practice, then you're looking at a very skillful, and I call it an art form anyway.
But you're still training them to hit the face, aren't you?
Well, to score points actually, and the scoring area of the body, part of the body, is the face, of course, which you use a straight left. I suppose really you want to finish the fight as quickly as possible. But if you have fighters like Peter Berrigan, for instance, who is definitely not a punching type fighter, he's more of a skillful boxer, he's never ever going to win a fight by knocking people out.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Because he doesn't hit hard enough. He relies absolutely on his boxing skills.
Yes, so you're scoring points. Now, in the context of the modern rules, you've got face and torso, haven't you? What is the scoring area?
Well, this is a thing actually that a lot of people don't realise, and I'd just like to put this in too, that the average football fan would know 90%, or 90% of them would know 90% of the rules. But the average boxing fan, 90% of them wouldn't know hardly any of the rules. They believe that just because a bloke's throwing a lot of punches is winning the fight.
Right.
Where in effect, what happens is the punches must land on the target area. And that target area consists of the front and side of the head, which includes your ears,
yes,
the front part of the torso, and this is how it's described in the rule books,
yes,
to an imaginary line drawn across the hips through the navel. Now these punches must be landed with the knuckle part of the glove. That's that part there,
yes,
on that area to score points.
Right. So actually in judging then, you're looking at the number of punches scored within the scoring area.
Within the scoring
same
area.
As archery or some
Yes,
other field? Like?
with the knuckle part of the glove, of course.
Yes, yeah.
If you strike with the back of the hand, that's a foul punch. If you strike with the heel of the hand or the palm of the hand, that's a foul punch, and you can be disqualified for doing that. Also, if you strike in the privileged areas, which are the back of the neck, in the kidney region, or of course below the belt, as they call it, they're disqualification punches. You could be disqualified for doing that.
The other problem you have, of course, is it's always a little more sensational in the ring. I mean, people do suffer comas within the league and even cricket these days, and certainly boxing, but boxing seems to be highlighted a little more, perhaps.
Boxing always is the headlines,
yes,
and of course the do-gooders straight away jump onto the bandwagon and say, abolish this barbaric, brutal sport.
So I guess they're entitled to their opinion on that, though. What?
Of course they are,
and
unless they speak to me.
Yes, and you have to live with it as a trainer.
Well, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems a long way from, I guess, for you, from the sort of amateur boxing days in England, then professional boxing. You boxed in the Navy, was it?
Yeah, I boxed in the Navy, yes.
Yeah.
I was a Navy champion back in those years anyway. A lot of years ago.
And you didn't go down to the sea in ships, you went under the sea in ships. You were in submarines, weren't you?
Yeah, I was 6 years in submarines.
Yes, yes. And I don't suppose they had the refinements then that they have now.
Well, we'd come in from sea, and then I'd be called on to go and do a tournament, and we'd probably been at sea for 3 weeks or something, and under the water for most of that time, you know?
Yeah.
Pretty hectic.
Yeah, and you were an asthmatic, I read.
Yes, I'd suffered very badly from asthma, and one time actually I was on the medication, the spin inhalers and those type of things, and I go back into the boxing again, and I started exercising myself and doing a little bit of weight training and punching the heavy bag and that type of thing, and eventually I was able to give the medication away, and I just sort of survive on the amount of training that I do.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? And the old punching bag, you can go back to that when you have an attack. It sort of beats drugs all the time, I guess.
Well, it makes the lungs work extra hard, and I think that's probably what helps more than anything.
Yeah, another thing I'd like to say to you, Wal, is that the number of boys within the Hunter Valley who speak very highly of you because of your work within the Police Boys Club movement when you first came here. When was that? Mid-60s, wasn't it? Somewhere?
Yes, so 65 I think I arrived in Newcastle. Originally I came to Western Australia, and I coached the boys at the Medina Police Boys Club south of Fremantle for quite a while. And then I decided to have a look at Australia. I got as far as Newcastle in 1965, never moved any further.
Yeah, I'm glad.
I got tied up with the Newcastle Police Boys Club, and I did about 4 years there with them.
Yes, in that time you obviously put through hundreds, if not thousands of boys and taught them the manly art of self-defence, as it was explained.
I think we used to have sometimes about 60 boys, and it was just about impossible to get through them all, over night time, in a matter of, say, a couple of hours.
Never mind, I mean, it takes time and effort and And not everybody helps the kids as you have done, Wal, and you know, we're very proud of that. We're also very proud that you've got 2 Australian champions coming up in Peter and Phil. Congratulations on that also. And thanks for your time today on the Valley's People. And here's the fingers crossed for a world champion for you.
My pleasure, and I hope so.
Okay. Thank you very much, Wal Bentley, and I'll be back in just a moment. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our 2 guests today. Firstly, from the Flying Gollens, the principal stuntman, Ian Gollen, quite a horseman. And also Mr. Hunter Valley Boxing himself, Wal Bentley. I hope too that you'll be with us again when we meet more of the Valley's people. Goodbye for now.